All right.
I understand this is a group that needs to begin right on time. That was the message from Kimberly, who supported you last week. So we're going to get started. My name is Jacqueline Raphael. I am a school and system improvement expert at Education Northwest, which runs the Region 17 Comprehensive Center. And it's my pleasure to work with Zach and help to facilitate these task force meetings. We're going to pull up the slides in a moment and get started. So good morning, everybody. And thank you for coming this morning. All right, July 1. I know what's on my mind, and that's a holiday coming up. So maybe we could go to the next slide. We're going to do a roll call. This is also to help me and Zach to make sure we get to know you all a little bit better and know who's here. If you can say your name, I'm going to go around and use my screen to call on you, and I apologize, but say your name and your role, and also maybe thinking about the holiday, what you're excited to do this summer. I know it sounds a little childlike, but I've got that on my mind for sure. I'm looking for some time off. So, Zach, why don't you go first, since you're right under me in my screen.
Zach Hawkins, I'm the Director of Indian Ed for All at the Office of Public Instruction, and I've been asked to help facilitate the Chapter 58 revisions on behalf of OPI. It's great to be here with you all. And as far as me, you know, this weekend, obviously I was not here last Thursday. I was on vacation, so I'm honestly just looking forward to the long weekend to sort of get caught up on all things home life, you know, and just kind of recuperating after vacation. You know how it is with vacation. It's a lot of work to relax sometimes. So anyway, that's me.
All right, thank you. Stevie.
Hi, I'm Stevie Schmitz from Rocky Mountain College, where I serve as the Director of Education. This weekend, I'm not sure exactly what I'm looking forward to. Might be a weekend off for everybody, but our family runs a couple fireworks stands, so it's a big weekend for us. So we're looking forward to finishing that up this weekend.
All righty. That's great. Here in Portland, where I was away as well, I was in Florida avoiding the heat wave in Portland, which is hilarious. But they've banned fireworks, at least in Portland, because of the conditions. It's just very, very dry out here. My garden is a mess. So
yeah, it's the same here. You can buy them, but you're not supposed to.
Oh,
apparently not everybody's getting that message.
Oh, wow. Well, good luck with that. Okay. Next, I see Tristan.
Oh, sorry, guys. I wasn't prepared. Good morning. My name is Tristan. I'm with the Office of Public Instruction here in Montana, and I am helping you guys, assisting, doing the minutes, and anything else you guys need throughout your meeting.
Thank you. You've been a great help already. Okay, Curtis.
Good morning, Curtis Smeby, MSU Northern. I'm going to go to my my log cabin up in the Bear Pond Mountains this weekend. So avoid the fireworks, and that'll be very nice.
Sounds nice. Okay, Gary, I recognize a number of you from not just our call, but our focus group. So nice to see you. Hi, Gary.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Gary Lucene, I'm a trustee in Bozeman, and I'm looking forward to moving ahead on a lot of house and yard projects.
Got it. Okay. McCall.
Hi, good morning. I'm McCall Flynn, the Executive Director at the Board of Public Ed. I am going to spend some time with my family at Georgetown Lake this weekend.
Wonderful. Gail.
Yeah, I'm the county superintendent for Richland County, which is in Sydney. And I am actually at my daughter's house. I have a 4-day-old grandbaby here. So that's really fun. So she's upstairs having fun, and I'm down here on a conference call. Yay!
All right. Thank you. Emily. Good morning.
Morning. My name is Emily Dean. I'm the Director of Advocacy for the Montana School Boards Association. And I'm looking forward to heading to our family cabin tonight immediately after work.
Wonderful. All those cabin retreats. That sounds really nice. Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Posner-Brown, and I'm a grade 5 through 8 librarian in Lewistown. And my husband and I are in the middle of a kitchen remodel, and that's going to keep us going for the next month or so, well through the 4th.
Wonderful. All right, there's a theme here. Cabins. All right, Lisa.
Good morning. I am a rancher who direct markets beef and lamb. So this weekend is really busy for meat deliveries and sales. It's a good grilling weekend. We'll hit a rodeo. And the most exciting thing in my life today is that my son, who is in the Air Force, he's in fighter pilot school, is coming home for the weekend. So I haven't seen him for a long time, and I'm excited to pick him up from the airport tonight.
Wonderful. I hope it's a lovely reunion. Nishala, and let me know if I'm mispronouncing your name, please.
No, you did pronounce, that's correct. Yeah, my name is Nishala Silva. I'm the Assessment Accreditation and Data Coordinator at MSU Billings. So I just got back from Yellowstone on Tuesday, so I don't have major plans this weekend, but maybe some cleaning projects, so.
All righty. Susan.
I am a professor in special education at MSU Billings, and I will be grading papers this weekend.
All right. Kirk, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Kirk Miller. I'm the Executive Director of School Administrators Montana. Happy to hear the stories of what's happening with everybody. Good to see a lot of you. What I'm planning to do this weekend is head to Lewistown, where my grandkids live, and the festivities of 4th of July.
Nice. Lovely. All right, Mary. Good morning. Hope you're muted, Mary.
Mary Ducharme, Kalispell, therapist with engineering and assistive technology professional background. I just got back from a memorial. My spouse's brother had an aortic aneurysm, and so we met up with family in Michigan. I'm born and raised in Michigan, and so this weekend we're probably just going to relax.
Got it. Oh, good. I'm sorry about your loss. Let's see, Carrie, did I call on you already? I don't think so. Okay.
It's actually Kari. My name is Kari Orendorf. I'm from MSU in Bozeman. I'm a health enhancement professor. And I am starting the weekend off early because it's Canada Day and I'm Canadian. So haven't been to Canada since 2018. So I'm a little bummed and I'm jonesing to get home. But for the weekend, I do have a friend coming into town and we're going to float one of the rivers.
Lovely. That sounds really nice. I see a Jay Eagleman.
Yo, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody. I don't know what's
Morning.
going on there. Sounds like everybody has a plan for the weekend.
Yeah, we want to know yours and your role too, if you don't mind, just so.
I'm gonna stay cool. I'm gonna drink a little water, go play outside, maybe cut a little grass, maybe even start a cult. So I'm just gonna kick back.
Lovely. Okay. And what's your first name, Mr. Eagleman, and where are you at, or your role?
I'm Jonathan J. Eagleman. I am the Ojibwe Nahia language, history, culture instructor for Box Elder School currently. We live up here in Rocky Boy, Montana, in the Bears Mountains.
Yeah. I've been to your area, so I've been to Rocky Boy. So yeah, nice to see you. It's a little hard to make you out, so I was kind of guessing about a number of things. All right. Let's see. Who have I missed? Is there? I think that's everybody. Gail, did I get you? Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Okay. Have we missed anyone? Okay. Well, thank you again. I will be repairing my garden and my lawn, which looks really sad. I'm just really thinking of getting rid of it. I think things are changing in Portland and the rest of the planet. So, but today's a blissfully and blissfully cloudy day. So it's really nice. I wasn't here last time. I also was on vacation. So I guess Zach and I have some catching up to do, but we met with Kimberly and have a pretty good idea of what happened. And we'll be working together on our process to ensure that everybody's clear on where we're going and we get the most out of these meetings. We recognize your time is valuable. So again, thank you so much for being here. We're going to go through a short recap of our last session to the best of our ability, and you can clue us in if we've missed anything. We're going to focus on a couple high leverage topics that you identified in a longer list previously. And in particular, and this was something we asked you to think about and read about for this meeting, hands-on experiences through a residency for in-service educators, and also more thinking about mentorship and other ways that students gain clinical experience through observation, for example. And at the end of the meeting, we'll review our next steps. And again, we may do some adjusting in our process as we talk through what we need to accomplish by the end of our time together. Next slide, please. I want to remind all of you, and we can put this in the chat, this is a storage spot for all of the materials that we look at together for minutes on our meetings, agendas for our meetings. Tristan has been wonderful at helping us maintain this, and I hope that you have access to it. If you have any trouble, let us know, but this will be a useful place to go if you need to catch up on a meeting or want to review where we're going. Okay, these are the topics, lever topics that were identified last time that relate to Chapter 58 and the Quality Teacher Preparation Program. These are, as I understand it, potential areas where we may want to do some revision of the ARMS, or we may want to look at the language that's there and think about, are there things that should be augmented, expanded, changed to reflect some of the discussion we have around these topics. The first one relates, and I can say, having worked on the focus groups that we did with a group, a diverse set of stakeholders, these resonate really well with the themes from that focus group report, which I understand you may have had available to you and may have looked at in advance. These were the themes, almost all of these to a T, were themes that we heard when we talked to educator prep program students, representatives from the institutions, as well as teachers and others. Tristan, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to let everyone know that I dropped the ball and then didn't get that report up for everyone because I was waiting on someone to get it to me and I forgot to check back in. So anyways, I will check back in with them again today and hopefully we can have it up later this afternoon.
Wonderful. Well, I think it's, I won't say it's a scintillating read, but it's a comprehensive look at quite a few consistent themes that came out in our discussions with stakeholders. And the purpose of those focus groups, as the report explains, is to be able to identify some areas for potential change, some concerns and observations made by really a whole host of folks, including a small number of students. I conducted that focus group, and that was really fun. So the first topic relates to pedagogy, the balance between content versus pedagogical knowledge, differentiating the learning experience, ensuring that candidates have a strong background in how to teach, not just what to teach. And there are a number of, this is a hugely important topic to this chapter and to your work. Real world experiences, including something like a year-long residency that ensures that candidates have a really good background in the kinds of contexts they'll be working and have more hands-on experience than they might have now. More robust observations and mentorship, an extended amount of time, perhaps more than they get regularly now, And keep in mind, there's a lot that I don't know and we don't know about what you already do in your programs and in programs you've participated in, but this was an area to investigate as a group. A focus on continuous improvement of educators and an emphasis on lifelong learning. How are we accountable for growing in our profession in Montana as we teach or as we do other things related to students in schools? The ability to develop strong relationships with students, parents, and the community. This came through very strongly in the focus group conversations. How important this skill is, and are there things that can be done to ensure that candidates develop these skills, particularly with different target audiences, and then having the appropriate technical skills and knowledge in order to do the job and do it well. Is there any comment on any of these topics? Is there anything someone would like to add?
I'd like to add the 1D to 3D, the science initiative, STEM initiative. Are you familiar with that?
No, please say a little more about it.
Where you're using notebooks from all the way from kindergarten on, and you set up experiments, and then as science goes across the board, it's in literacy, there's science words, and but you're asking questions, and you're having it's kind of critical thinking, and you're you start out just making a picture of the item, like animal. You take the 4 legs of an animal, and then you look at each leg and what that leg does. So kind of like observation and developing a notion of structure and function by actually looking at something and
And are
structure
you,
and function starts with like marshmallows and toothpicks, and what's the strongest marshmallow toothpick arrangement, and and then you kind of build on it through the year.
got it. And are you suggesting that this is a program that could be discussed or would be useful in relation to some of these topics?
Yes, I'm in relationship to the pedagogy.
Yep. Very good. Okay, well, we'll definitely, it's my understanding so far that the group discusses, and we're going to focus on the mentorship, residency, and discuss this some, and then look at the language in the ARM and think about potential revisions. And we may refine this a little bit. We want to make sure that we move through it.
Well, OPI is teaching that right now, the 1D to 3D science program. So
got it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else have a comment about any of these? Something that that's been left off the list, perhaps? Hopefully not, but.
This is Gary. I'm just curious if there's any reason for us to define some of these terms that we use, such as differentiated learning and personalized learning, individualized learning. Are those all the same, and do we have the same understanding of those terms? Even the term equality of educational opportunities, of like what does that mean, and are we consistent in our thoughts on those different terms?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and my guess is probably not all the time, and that's maybe a good thing. But I think, and Zach, help me here, but my thinking is, as we discuss these, we will need to do that kind of clarification and discuss some common vocabulary, because ultimately we need to look at whether we're going to alter the language in the ARM that's related to that topic And we need to be very clear in that situation. So as we go through these topics, it would be very appropriate to clarify what we mean by these terms. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that, and that would naturally feed into, any conversations about language change.
Yeah. So we can make a note to pay attention to that as we move through each one of these. So that's a very good point. Okay, well, let's move on to our next, to our topic.
Yeah, so
Yep, go ahead.
you want me to go on this one, Jacqueline?
Please, sure, yes.
Yeah, so just in our debrief with Kimberly, this was something that on the 17th, when I kind of following the 17th meeting, I put together just a conversation about how are we going to the actual process verbiage changes. And these were the options that were kind of thrown out last Thursday. Now, I do know that from our debrief with her, that subcommittees was not a popular option, that folks were there's pretty universal agreement that we did not want to go in the route of having subcommittees sort of work on certain sections. But I think it is important that we do sort of arrive at some type of consensus around how changes are going to be made. So, some other options would be just sort of collectively, we talked through the verbiage changes and, the scribe or Tristan would actually, maybe even on the screen so everybody can see it, be making those changes until we kind of get to a consensus on, yeah, that looks good. We're going to go with that. Or it could be, process of individual task force members, feel strongly about a certain section and they submit, a proposed change to the larger group, and that's maybe discussed and then voted on. Or perhaps there's another process of some kind that this group would like to kind of work on. So just wanted to circle back on that and hear where people are at in their thinking on this.
Zach, this is Kurt. I would make a comment on, I think the process that's outlined there is just fine. But I also want to point out that there have been recommendations that address some sections of Chapter 58 that have already, from a variety of different groups that have already been submitted to the Office of Public Instruction. And so I just think that those should be brought forward. Those recommendations should be brought forward from the office for the task force to be able to contemplate, rather than thinking that the task force would have to submit that on behalf of, on behalf of whatever the group is. I'm specifically speaking of recommendations that were in memo form from the OT Recruitment and Retention Task Subcommittee on Licensure, but it had elements in it that would address Chapter 58 as well. And there's probably other recommendations that have already been collected in that public input and in the public dialogue that you're having that I just really think it'd be valuable for the task force to be exposed to all of that as we're working through the sections.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Kurt. That I will have to probably do a little digging to find out who those were submitted to and how I can get my hands on those to share with this group.
Okay. Yeah, so the specifics of the OT licensure subcommittee recommendation was a memo directly to Superintendent Arnson, February 23rd.
Sounds like you know a little bit about that one. Oh, that's very helpful. Okay.
Is this report a position paper or a white paper, or what type of report is it?
Oh, it was a recommendation from a subcommittee that was working around licensure issues. And I know that's chapter 57, but there may be some parts of what are there that would impact chapter 58. So it was a group of educators and public that have been working on recruitment and retention issues and made recommendations for flexibility in the rules around licensure and gaining administrative licensure. Is the reason why I'm definitely
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I'm coming from a research, RESNA, Rehab Engineering Society of North America. And, you know, we define papers as position papers, white papers, in white paper is our position on, or is kind of like a recommendation of, what we think should be the best option. Yeah, but anyways, and then we edit it. We tell, once we have the draft, we edit it and we tell exactly where the problem is. And if it's a general problem, a technical problem, or an editorial problem, and we go through the entire draft. So I think we should have some kind of process like that. Where everybody edits it or has some kind of document where they edit the draft and put in well, I think there should be more discussion on this or discussion on that. Yeah, their opinions, and then people looking at it. I don't know how long this this chapter 58 sessions will go on. It's through September or through the summer, right?
Yeah, I believe we need to be wrapped up sometime in October.
This is Gary. Just for clarification, on the first bullet, subcommittees assigned to certain sections. My thought right now is that we have been looking at subsection 1 and subsection 3, I believe.
That's correct. Yep.
Would the subcommittees be assigned to other sections of chapter 58?
Yeah, so I think the idea would be that as we work through sections, we would put together subcommittees and, and I guess backing up just a little bit, as we have the big picture kind of conversations, and then it becomes apparent that, based on those conversations, there are specific, parts of sub chapters or, specific verbiage in specific spots that, there's a desire to make changes. And at that point, there would be sort of a subcommittee that would really just focus on those particular ones. And then there might be other ones that are assigned to another group. And it would just be a way to kind of divide up the work in a way that might be easier than if you have a larger group, where you have a whole bunch of people, going back and forth about, do I want this? Do we want this? Do we want this? But obviously anything that came out of those subcommittees would still be reviewed by the entire group and, be open to tweaking.
Okay, just in follow-up, Zach, thanks. I'm curious if when we look at these items that we really focus on the chapter 58 language that we need to be dealing with. And I don't know if I'm right in this or not, but it seems like a lot of our discussions can go beyond that language in chapter 58. So I'm just trying to think of a way, given the time frame we have, what's the best process to keep us focused if our task is to look at, review, amend chapter 58 language, then it may be a challenge for the facilitators to keep our group focused on that specific language. But I'm have we had discussions already that go beyond chapter 58 language, and what can we do to focus on the language we have to deal with?
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a good point, Gary. And, I think that's something we're still, sort of, I think, trying to hone in on exactly how this process is going to work in terms of, when do we know it's time to move on to the next section. But also we do want to obviously be, we want to make sure that everybody's heard in this process. We want to make sure that before we move on to a section that, collectively as a group, there's general agreement that the critical things have been discussed and any potential changes have been discussed. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I am open to suggestions about a process, to make sure that we're moving through this in a timely fashion as well. And again, that's where potentially subcommittees might be a good tool. But again, I don't want to. The feedback I got from Kimberly was that was not a popular option with this group.
Yeah, I guess just to give you an example of, if we look at the topic of residency or internship, which I think is a very good topic to discuss, I'm still trying to figure out exactly where in chapter 58 address that language. So I think taking a concept like this and fitting it immediately right into the specific language in chapter 58 may give us a good context of really give us some boundaries of what our discussions would, how they would move forward.
As a facilitator, I think this is an excellent point, and one we were talking about just yesterday and the day before briefly. We can take responsibility for ensuring that we're looking at the language as we move to a topic. In fact, I just put the ARM in the chat, a link to the ARM, and we can try to help ensure that we have that front and center for all of you to be able to reflect on as we move through these topics. And then ultimately we are going to need a process to be able to sit down and wordsmith some of the changes that or adaptations that you all recommend, and then have a review of that, as somebody mentioned, to make sure we're comfortable with the changes. Lisa, I know you had, oh, go ahead. Yeah, Lisa, you had your hand up.
Hand raised.
Please.
Thank you. Gary, I've been wondering how to make it all fit into the ARM as well, but I think it's really important for us to establish what we want to see first, and then revise and wordsmith the regulations. But we need to know where we're going first so that we can make it fit. So I would love to start with the with the larger picture and what we want to see on the ground before we start worrying about how to make it fit into the rules and regulations.
I agree.
Looks like Stevie has her hand raised.
I do. I don't disagree with anything I've heard so far, but I guess my overriding question in the big picture and in the minutia is, are we building this from scratch, or are we revising what we have in place? That is, it sounds like from Kirk, there's at least been one group that has submitted some recommendations based on how the chapter is or isn't working for the individual EPPs. And so there's been a lot of input about what the changes are. And of course, we can come at this a variety of ways, but I think it'd be good if as a group, we decided whether we're going to talk about grand and lofty things that we may be able to put into ARM, or if we can get down to the granular piece about what's working and what's not, and decide how we're going to attack this animal, because it's going to be important to know what we can do as well as what we want to do and use our time really well. So I think that's why I felt strongly that we worked as an entire group until we had a greater understanding of the direction we're moving and had a uniform picture of next steps.
Thank you, Stevie. So any other comments, thoughts? So, and Jacqueline, you can chime in here. You know, what I'm hearing is right now there's still a desire really just to focus on big picture. You know, where do we want to go? What's our vision? And then from there, really go back and look at, you know, specific sections. And how do we make changes to those sections to achieve the vision? So I guess, you know, that's fine. This is, you know, this group wants to go that way. My recommendation would be, as we continue having these conversations, that maybe we kind of set, as we're thinking about a timeline, we kind of set a time frame by, you know, by this time in this process, we will be done kind of with the big picture conversations, and then we transition into actually tackling the work of the verbiage changes. Does that sound amenable to everybody? Jacqueline, do you got any other thoughts from a facilitation standpoint?
The only thing I'd add is I heard it's important that we help the members get clarity on what is and isn't possible. And I think that's makes a lot of sense to me. I would definitely want that, a little bit more understanding of what we can and can't change. And we may want to refer to some of the chapters, I'm sorry, some of the arms in the chapter and say, for example, as somebody did, we're looking at arm number 3, chapter 3, as we talk about, for example, today's topic. And then we will need to shift to how does that relate to what we see here and how might we want to change it. But yeah, I think this makes sense. And maybe also, Zach, you and I can kind of set out a timetable that ensures that we get to all of the items that we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So keep folks focused on the timeline.
Yeah. Okay. Should we go ahead and move on to the next slide then?
I think so.
Assuming that, why does it do this? There we go. Oh.
Yes, these are the guiding questions that were on the agenda to give you something to reflect on. And I suggest we talk through these a little bit. This is definitely our big picture portion of the process. There were a couple of resources on hands-on experiences through residency and mentorship programs in Louisiana, and a more general article about the same. So we'll have some discussion about this, and we have about, is that right, Zach, about 70 minutes, 60, 70 minutes? So not really, we have less than an hour. So, and then we need to leave some time for next steps at the end.
Yeah, yep.
So let's shoot for being done about 45 minutes from now. So I will open it up and say, when you looked at the articles, hopefully you did, what did they make you think about? What themes occurred to you that are important for us to consider as a task force? Susan, I see you raised your hand. Thank you. And
in reading the article, I thought it was interesting that certainly they brought up a point that was raised in our discussion last week, which was about the financial burden on students. And one of the points that they brought out in the article was that they gave the example of residents working in the schools for a year were given a stipend of $2,000. And the other range was for teachers in the residents in the Boston teaching residency program who got over $12,000 a year, but that was supported through private funding. I can see that the issue of stipends to teachers, residents, teacher residents, is going to be a major challenge because at MSUB, a lot of our students are on financial aid and they will have difficulty in committing to doing a year-long residency with maybe only getting $2,000. And it could actually hurt our education preparation programs for some of our students if we have a requirement that doesn't help to financially support those students. And I don't know whether that support would come from the state or how that would work. The second thing I noted was the issue of mentoring. And they talked in the article about the challenges in finding mentors, that there would be a requirement that, or there is a requirement in Louisiana, there's a requirement that teachers who are going to be mentors in the school for these residents would have to undergo a training program. And again, is that going to be at cost to the potential mentors? Will they get OPI credit for that? That's a minor issue, I realize, but there was a challenge they mentioned in this article in finding enough mentors. Now, at MSUB, we have a challenge in finding enough teachers in the school who will take our students for student teaching. And I know that they have this in Bozeman as well. So if we're already challenged in finding enough placements for our students in the schools, to add that additional requirement of we're only going to be able to use placements where we have teachers who have gone through the training program, that will be an additional challenge. So those are the two main challenges that I saw coming out of this. And I'm not sure whether the state is thinking about providing funding to schools and to institutions, as it said in Louisiana, that their state had to have a number of grants available for institutions to apply for to support these initiatives. So I would be hesitant to put a requirement in 58 that this is a direction we're going to go in without there being a discussion about the funding of this.
Thank you. That's very clear. Gary, you had your hand up also.
Yeah, just in follow up to that, I think the one thing I surmised from reading both the articles is that particularly the one on raising the bar for teacher preparation out of Louisiana, is that they started that program and are continuing to gather data within their state. The limitations they cited in the article were, they acknowledged those and said they're relatively significant, but that doesn't dismiss the concept at all. So I'm also hesitant to put anything in Chapter 58 that would come across as a requirement or some directive for a residency program, even though I support that, without us having some good data within our state, really on how could that work? And from that process, would other options come up to expand in classroom training for teachers? So I think the data gathering to me would be critical in how to direct that program and how to guide it and to see if it's really beneficial.
Okay, so it sounds like what we're hearing is some planning on how this could actually happen is absolutely critical, including overcoming some challenges. And I think that almost goes without saying, but very, very important to point out. Emily, was it Emily who had her hand up? A couple people. I'm trying
Yes.
to go in order as best I can, although you may have raised your hand at the same time as someone else, but you're next.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Gary raises a couple points that I had been thinking about, not just from those articles, but some of the other research that I'd done after that. And one was, data on effectiveness. And I don't know if anyone here has any answers on this, but one thing I have been trying to look more into since this working group has started is actually effectiveness of programs currently. And it doesn't seem that we have anything that's really consolidated or available in terms of that, but maybe it's somewhere else and I don't know where that is. The other question that I had was from the articles, and this is similar to Gary's question, I don't think there's anything that prevents developing this type of program right now. With that, I think it's important to remember that these type of standards, standards are really the level of entry, not the exemplar. And I think that it's, we want obviously continuous improvement and high quality, but I think it is important to remember that standards are the level of entry. They are not the exemplar.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And another thing to keep in mind is as we're documenting things that might, for example, be a good pilot program, there's no reason we couldn't have some notes from these meetings that are shared with OPI that are things that we wouldn't necessarily put into the language of the ARM, but we want it to be considered or want to encourage it. So that's very helpful. Curtis, you have your hand up.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Yes.
This may be a technical issue, but in some of rural Montana, where we place student teachers along the High Line and other places, 3 years for supervising teachers are becoming harder and harder to find just because of 3 years. And the way I look at advertisements in OPI or wherever I might look, I'm looking at Cutbank as an example. It's in the Trib regularly now. We'd be hard pressed to find a suitable supervising teacher, at least based on what we follow right now. So mentorships, partnerships may be even more challenging. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon, likely going to increase.
Okay, that's been brought up also, a challenge that's important. Laura, I don't think you've spoken. You have your hand up.
Thank you. So a couple different questions that have popped up as this has been discussed is, one, would that internship replace student teaching, that semester-long expectation? Hand in hand with that, I would point out that when student teaching, you don't get paid. It was mentioned by the gal from MSU, I think, who teaches special ed, that if we ask people to take a year, and what does a year mean? Is that a school year or is it a calendar year to be an internship? Well, we already give 3 to 4 months of our lives without any stipend to do student teaching. Personal background on that, I was a single parent in college, And so when I did student teaching, I had to quit my job so that I could student teach. And if we're looking at requirements for our base level expectations, I do think a pilot program with this is crucial. I do not feel this should go in the current round of revisions we're looking at making, because you have to remember there's much bigger than the traditional student who is ages 18 to 20, single and unattached. There's been a lot going on in Montana over the past decade, maybe even 30 years, with allowing for people who already have a bachelor's in some degree to then obtain their teaching credential. And so how would requiring something like a one-year internship affect people who are looking at a later in life credential and not having a stipend with that? There are some huge financial things that go into this, and needing to consider what all ages there are for that. I too was wondering about funding in terms of mentors, and just a side concept with accountability for mentors. I've taught in Class C schools in Montana, and the people who are assigned in Class C schools as our mentors within the building are often incredibly overworked, and they are a assigned mentor, but it is basically in title only. And so if that's part of something we would eventually put into the ARM, requiring ongoing mentorship and guidance, accountability in that system.
Thank you.
And sorry, one more thing with that. In the Class C schools and even some of the B schools, making sure that mentor is in the same credential area. For example, you don't want a math teacher necessarily mentoring an English teacher. Okay, thank you.
No, very, very good points. And I love the mention of a pilot. And again, I think we can keep some ideas sort of in a parking lot that may be broader thoughts as a result of this task force conversation, so that I don't want the big picture conversations that we're having to feel irrelevant. I think it's important, if there's interest in this topic, to be able to say, perhaps the task force recommends exploring how to structure something like this. But there's some really good challenges you're raising, and you're all doing a wonderful job, by the way, commenting on each other's comments, which is very helpful for us. So we appreciate that. Makes the facilitation a lot smoother and helps us to make connections. So thank you for doing that. I see Kirk. Oh, well, Gail, you had your hand up. Do you still have your hand up? I don't see you. No, not anymore. Okay. Kirk. And oh, no, I'm sorry. Stevie had your hand up earlier. I'm trying to ensure that if you haven't spoken, we give you an opportunity, but I think we're coming back around to Stevie and Gary and Kirk.
Thank you. I've waited some time to share this experience, but I think it's appropriate at this time. 20 years ago, I served on a task force at MSU Billings while I was the chair of the Billings School Board, looking at this particular topic. We went to a conference, we did a lot of research on year-long student teaching. And although I think to a member, the committee thought it was a really desirable thing to do, that the more time we could give students in front of a classroom was very important to their preparation. The obstacles were such that it was more of a pipe dream than a reality, in that we talked about the lack of mentors, which we already are experiencing. We talked about the elongating the time for teacher preparation, which wasn't desirable then and probably isn't now, in that we have a demand for teachers and we have a demand for them now, not in 5 years. We also talked about the money on all sorts of angles. The money for a student teacher to teach, as Laura was talking about, that can be a burden at one semester right now when we ask a student of 21, 22 to quit working and concentrate on teaching for a semester. Although it's so important, it would be extremely difficult, I think, to do it for a year. A $2,000 or a $12,000 stipend is probably not going to afford to keep a student going during that time. adding that amount of money to a mentor experience is probably not going to be seen as adequate compensation either, in a time when teaching is already so taxing and demanding. To ask them to do something for a year long to help a new aspiring teacher, perhaps a struggling teacher, all those things led us to believe, and we looked really carefully at the Washington program, which was a year long, had been funded by the state. And certainly the experience helped teachers become more prepared, no doubt about it. But the obstacles to doing that and not chasing people away from this career were significant. I think that the student teacher debt through 4 years of college is significant already compared to the return on investment through starting wages in Montana. And that's just a reality we have to deal with. I think also it'd be difficult to look to school districts to fund this, and Kirk can certainly speak to this with his work on OCHI and other places, but there is not probably a lot of resources for us to lean on our partners for funding either. So the cost likely, as Susan said, would flow back to the students who are already experiencing extreme debt. So I'm not sure that this plan should be included in 58, nor do I think that we should have two different tracks for preparation, in that the Council of Deans has tried very hard to make sure that we all understand what the Montana Quality Teacher looks like in preparation. And if we offer different tracks and opportunities, I'm not sure how that blends with our Montana product, our Montana expectation about what preparation is about. Certainly, I would agree that it's a great idea, but I'd also be remiss if I didn't say that all the EPPs have multiple opportunities to put students in the field, not only through student teaching, but through sophomore experience and junior field work. I think all of the EPPs try to do their level best to give students, pre-service teachers, real experience in the classroom. We know that there's nothing that we can do that simulates that, like putting them in a classroom in front of kids. But I think the obstacles have to be addressed. Otherwise, we're just wishing for something that I agree would be great, would be wonderful. But I'm not sure that we want to include it in rule if we can't really accomplish it.
Thank you, Stevie. Okay, so one of the things I'm hearing is, and I'm sure we're all hearing, is there are benefits to increasing or having these experiences, such as a residency, but this is a problematic vehicle to achieve those benefits. So one of the things that you're saying is, are there other ways that we could do that? And are we doing it sufficiently across the board for all teacher candidates? Gary, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add to this, I think we've been focused on only one aspect of teacher preparation, and that's on internships or residency concept. The other piece is the academic side of it. And I think that's a topic we need to discuss too, particularly what I'm hearing in the district is needing new teachers coming in, having better background in the science of reading, trauma-informed practices, social emotional behavior in the classroom. So, you know, are there things, which I think relates to chapter 58, I believe, but, you know, if the residency aspect, it definitely has great potential. I think I totally support it. But looking at the barriers, they're fairly significant. We'd have to work through, not that we can't, but that may take some time. So are there things we can look at on educator preparation programming that all teacher prep programs could institute in the very near future academically for new teachers? And the one thing I liked about the Louisiana approach was they wanted it consistent across all of their educational prep programs. And is that feasible in Montana? So just would like to throw out that side of the equation on the academic portion as well.
Thank you. And also the emphasis on across the board. I really appreciate. Kirk, you've had your hand up for a little bit.
Yeah, I think I just want to touch on several of the things that been discussing in the big picture. I believe that we should focus with the Chapter 58 task force here on the rulemaking process, because ultimately that's the responsibility here, and that the accreditation standards are the foundation upon which quality is to be built. And so Emily's comments about entry level, I think are really important to keep in mind. I think what will come out of the work of the task force are maybe some quality and state-of-the-art kinds of recommendations that could be incorporated, but the rulemaking process needs to remain at the level that we're considering the foundation upon which other ideas can be built. And so I would also add that in the end product, when the task force is done and a recommendation gets to the superintendent, and then the superintendent is making a recommendation that's likely to go to CISPAC and then to the Board of Public Education, that whole rulemaking process ends up being involved in one of the things that the legislature has required over 2 decades worth of work is that any change to administrative rule that would have a significant fiscal impact on those who are implementing the rule would need to have legislative approval. And it delays the implementation potentially of that, if there is impact, until the next legislative session. So the whole dialogue around, if somehow a year-long internship program was created and there were stipends and there were all of the things that would be right to do it right, like we read in the research, that would have a significant state contribution to be able to make student teaching in that format happen consistently in an equitable manner in all school districts across the state. And so at the end of this discussion, that would likely result in a significant fiscal impact to those that are implementing the program, and therefore the legislature we'd have to wait until the next legislative session, a year and a half away, for them to actually develop the revenue or appropriate the funding to be able to implement the rule as approved by the Board of Public Ed. So again, there are a lot of things that were being discussed there, and I totally agree. And then the last thing that I'll add is that we are preparing at this point to do a pilot of a portion of what we've described as residency through mentorship with an advanced student teaching model. Again, this is the Grow Your Own subcommittee of the Recruitment and Retention OT task force is taking a look at how basically a paid student teaching experience, and the district cooperates with the student teaching, and the mentor is provided through the district, and all of the concepts that have been discussed that we saw in Louisiana and South Dakota and all of the other research is getting ready to be launched. And so, there are folks in Montana that are thinking about the concepts that we're seeing in those other states. And I just truly believe that we need to be able to pilot some things like that to see how onerous it would be before, I wouldn't want us to put it in the rule is the final description here. And also to let everybody on the task force know that there's a lot of folks that already have their oar in the water trying to create systems and pilot what those systems would look like around residency and mentorship for our early career teachers and those in our EPP programs that are matriculating into our schools, because it's part of the pipeline. The Grow Your Own pipeline is one of the concepts that's out there. And that's big picture stuff too, but it interfaces with what our conversation.
Thank you, Kirk, so much. I was going to say, I was going to suggest that if there are pilots going on, that we share that information, and that's perfect. You anticipated that. And I think that could be a valuable part of some of the, as you said, some of the broader picture recommendations that we might put in a separate section of our notes that say these are things that we feel should be examined more closely. And all of you have raised some really important features of that, including data collection and being able to look at effectiveness and a number of other things. So thank you for sharing that. There are two other people that have raised their hands. Susan, I think we're getting a clear indication of whether this goes in the arms though or not, at least right now. So that's very helpful. Susan.
I just wanted to add that at MSU Billings, we had recognized that the residency program idea, concept, or a year-long student teaching would be good. And a few years ago, what we tried was we piloted a group of students doing their junior field experience in the fall and staying with that same teacher and doing their student teaching in the spring. Now, junior field experience doesn't require, it's not like 40 hours a week, but the idea was that there would be continuity in that the student would stay with the same teacher, and it would be for a whole year, and it would also allow the student in the first part of that year to finish up some of their coursework. So that was our attempt to address this. But the challenge we came up with against was all of those students that are getting endorsements in other areas. And they were not, we couldn't fit them into this model because we also require students who are doing endorsements to student teach. And that would be something to consider if we're requiring a year-long residency. Is that just for the getting their general education qualification? Would they then be expected after that year-long residency to then do additional time in the school for their endorsements, which is what we require now, that they have to have that component. For example, in special education, they have to do a student teaching for a special ed endorsement in the school. So would that require somebody to do 2 years in a school? I'm just going to throw that out there. Lisa, talk.
Okay, thank you. I think you were referring to Lisa, who has her hand up. I heard at the end, and you do. Please.
I do, thank you. I disagree with Kirk's first statement that said, let's just focus on the ARM stuff. I think our goal, and unless I am reading everything completely wrong, I think all of us want students to learn. And I think Gary's point that our curriculum could be changed and focus on competencies instead of seat time. I think Susan brought up the difficulties with requiring seat time. The residency is one tool. The ARM is a tool that we have. There are pilot programs, but we need to remember that our whole point is to get the kids to learn things. And so how do we integrate all of our tools? And don't ever forget that what we want is our kids to be prepared for the future. So we have a great opportunity as a committee, and I really hope that we will take advantage of this opportunity to integrate all of our tools. And I expect that this will take some work and some brainstorming and much more effort than just rewriting just wordsmithing the ARM to get that done. But I would hope that we always are remembering that we want kids to learn.
Thank you. That's very important to bring us back to our North Star and to think as a group. And Zach and I will debrief and offer as much clarity as we can about the full purview of the task force and what we are able to do and suggest, and including innovate. So I appreciate what you're saying, Lisa, and ensure that we're really clear about what we're responsible for in terms of the more specific technical wordsmithing and what we might be able to discuss as an action committee. So we can offer some help with that. Thank you. That's very important. I don't see any other hands up. Is there any other? Let me pause for a minute and see if somebody, yep, Laura.
So are we ready to move on to bullet point number 4, perhaps, in conjunction with this, or is that too big for what the time we have left today?
No, I think it's fine. We don't have a lot of time left. I didn't need to look at the prompt you for all the other questions, but please go ahead. You all did a wonderful job. You did your homework, obviously, and have given this a great deal of thought before the meeting. But please go ahead and if you have something to say about bullet point 4, now that would be good to share it.
Well, I'm curious about the wording of hands-on experience in diverse settings. My degree was from Carroll College in Helena. Helena is something like 95% Caucasian. Some of the schools are Title I, some of them aren't. So I remember when getting my teaching degree 10 years ago, it was a struggle living in Helena to get that hands-on diverse experience. And they said, oh, well, go to one of the reservation schools for a week, or go do this for a week, or go do that. And it was like, that was very difficult to accomplish. And I don't know how that works necessarily in Bozeman or in Billings or U of M with their programs, or Havre. But at Carroll, it was very difficult. And I'm wondering, again, with hands-on, what we can start to do with making sure that perhaps digital classrooms are allowed. And I specifically mean teaching in digital classrooms. I think now that we've had COVID, we realize everyone truly needs to have that is one of the diverse areas we need to have experience in, is teaching in an online platform. And how can teaching in an online platform maybe work towards diversity and work towards more experience, mentorships outside our typical pool of mentors that we reach out to in our public schools? Thoughts? Jacqueline, you're muted.
Thank you. Mary has put her hand up, and I wanted to acknowledge that she's put some great comments that are related to what you're saying, Laura, which is why she has her hand up in the chat, and we're keeping track of those as well. Go ahead, Mary.
Yes. I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Does anyone else, and we'll come back to you, Mary, if we have about another 5 to 8 minutes. Anybody else want to comment on Laura's question? How can we work together toward diversity of mentorships, hands-on experience in diverse settings, perhaps thinking about teaching in an online setting? How can we take advantage of that condition?
Can I talk now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to lose anything that we've learned from COVID. It was a big push. I'm in assistive technology, and it was a big plus to get technology finally into the schools, but there has to be building capacity for that. You know, we can't go depend on the expert model. We need people, teachers, to understand the technology and understand how to use it. So it eventually gets into universal design.
Thank you. That's a really good suggestion. Mr. Eagleman, I'm so sorry, I didn't catch your first name. Mr. Eagleman.
Hi, it's Jay. You know,
Jay.
I just want to make a couple of comments, and I appreciate the entirety of the group and their participation. One thing that I want to mention is that in the rural school setting, we'll say in the local control era, we have an opportunity to address the bulk of these issues, including the rulemaking process. In that, in the communities where we serve our students, there is the new question, and this is new, because yesterday there was an institutional system that said this is how you're going to go about doing these things. That has changed now. The entirety of the system is changing, like it or not. Okay, like it or not, the system is changing. So the local school districts and their respective boards, the burden, the onus of the delivery of these, we'll say, strategies now is really local. Here's an example. We don't have a music teacher. We're importing English language learners to come and teach English in our schools. We're in a tribal public school setting where our language, culture, and tradition now hinges technically on the burden of the community making the determination whether or not they want to save their language. One of our last Ojibwe speakers, I think today, is 83 years old. We have maybe 30, maybe hopefully 40 real bona fide language speakers left. And for the past year, and I think Zach can attest to this, we made every effort to come up with a standardization process, whereas in our local community, we're introducing the onus or the burden of that process and its full integration into the school system to say, here is our strategy then to have an impact within the local systems. And lo and behold, almost 1 year later, we have yet to make the first step to get the school boards together, the community, as well as the educational institutions to say, here's a process where local control can actually have a positive impact educationally, academically within our system. So I want to point this out one last time, that as a task force, as a group of, we'll say, educational professionals, it's not going to be clear cut. You know, that diversity, we're going to have a tough time doing it. It almost harkens back to where we're making new legislation, where we're in the legislative process, but we're falling within the constraints of the institution. So I think institutionally now, as this process begins to unfold, when you have existing bodies of law that say, this is how things should go. And here's an example. If things should go the way they should go, according to the law, why is the bulk of our institutions, especially the local tribal school districts, why are they Indian education for all non-compliant? So I want to leave the group with that thought. And I apologize for not participating, but in the future, I think we need to get a little bit more intense, a little bit more organized, and really come up with a common focus area where we can make and affect some changes. You know, the good superintendents has allowed us to do all of this. Nonetheless, you know, the superintendents, they're like business committee, they're like the tribal council. They come and go. Okay, so I want to say that much. And again, thank you all for your participation.
Thank you so much, Jake, for sharing and for pointing us in this direction and giving us the opportunity to remind ourselves of what we may and may not be able to do here and how we have to think essentially outside the box, a lot of boxes.
And I think Jay, you know, what can we do to have our, you know, our candidates better understand the environment and the issues that Jay's raising?
Are you asking me, Zach, or?
No, I'm saying as a general thought process for this group, how much in our educator prep programs are these types of issues that you're bringing up? How aware are our teacher candidates of these things? And in this group, how could we affect change that would result in them being more aware and more prepared to say, you know, be a good, you know, implementer of Indian education for all, but also to understand as they step into a rural, small rural community, those dynamics of local control, those dynamics of, you know, tribal communities, so that they can be better practitioners and better serve the students in those communities within that environment.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Yep.
So it sounds like one of the opportunities that we've sort of shifted a little bit to, and we can thank, I think, Mary for pointing us to a different bullet among these and kind of honing in on ensuring that the clinical experience and hands-on experience that candidates get exposes them to more diverse settings. That seems like a crucial feature of this issue, not necessarily right now a residency program. We're not able to plan and fund that in the period during which this task force meets, but we are able to explore how to increase the experience of candidates in diverse settings, and that it's critical to do so. This is one of the things I'm hearing from this last part of our conversation. And it may be valuable to also examine what we do know about residencies that are going on in Montana currently and how they might be expanded if they have success stories that we would want to build on. Any final comments before we wrap up this meeting about any of the bullets that are here that you came with the desire to bring up before we move on? We have just a little bit of opening for one more comment. Laura.
Well, nobody else is saying anything, so sorry, I'll raise my hand again. This may be a question to ask with Zach, and if Jay's still available, if Jay has input. But I remember when we had our first meeting of this committee in the beginning of June, and one of the slides came up and it showed that the ARM had 2 bullet points. And the first bullet point was assuring that all students across Montana have equitable access to education. The second bullet point, which if we give attention to screen time and we give attention to presence, something of equal importance was assuring the Indian Ed for All in Montana. And yes, that was constitutionally mandated in the 1970s with our new state constitution. And I love that Jay just pointed out, most of our schools are in non-compliance on that. And so I think that points to a huge cultural issue in Montana. Of those of us who are born and bred white in Montana and do not have extensive experience with Native communities in Montana, there's a great amount of discomfort and not necessarily saying racism, but not wanting to offend when we teach. And I think that's a massive part of Zach's job and that part of OPI. I do not deny that. But I really think in our teacher preparation, that needs to receive a lot more attention. And so I think that bullet point number 4, ensuring hands-on experience in diverse settings, if we're going to fulfill that requirement as constitutionally required, which we as teachers say we will uphold that part of the Constitution, we need more help in being comfortable doing that and knowing how to incorporate that.
Thank you, Laura. That's really well said and well put. And also, if it's constitutionally required, it gives us, I think, a little bit more of an opportunity or a mandate to look at how the rules and the ARM supports this, because that is one thing that I can see an ARM and a rule that's required where it would overlap. Basically what I'm saying is this is an area where we may be able to do some rulemaking and be able to say, if this is not happening, what steps need to be taken. This has been a really rich conversation. I want to be respectful of your time. We only have a few more minutes. Zach, I'm pretty sure the next step says next steps. I mean, the next slide is about our next steps. Oh, these are some slides from last time, looking at chapter 1 and 3. These are some of the key questions. I have put in the chat the ARMs, which I can assure you we will look over carefully to be able to determine how to begin to direct our conversation to that work. Zach, can you go to the next slide, please? Oh, okay. That's it. One thing that I think we will do is obviously put all of this conversation into notes and begin to think through a timeline for the entire process and perhaps propose a way to move us forward, both on the big picture and on some of the specifics for the rules that we need to begin to wordsmith and begin to adapt. Are there other suggestions for our next steps? Basically, Zach and I can debrief this meeting and recommend, and we can send this out to you, some ideas for our process. Zach, what are some other things that you would like to add that we should do? Another thing is another thing is definitely to look into some of the existing recommendations that have been made. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then there was also a request that perhaps on the Google site, there's a little bit of like more information about all of the members, the task force, and maybe like a short bio or something like that. I'm going to see what, I wasn't directly involved in putting together the task force. I'm going to see what information we may already have for folks. But I may also be shooting out a message asking for, like a short bio or some things like that. So, and yes, I will see if at the next meeting I can bring forth some of the existing recommendations that may have been proposed, just to kind of fill in everybody's background knowledge on some of the bigger picture things that are already being have already been recommended per Kirk's, Kirk brought that up at the beginning today.
Okay, and I ask a little bit of patience. I know in meetings like these, folks get anxious about how are we going to accomplish our goals? Is this the process that's going to get us there? And we really needed to hear what your bigger issues are and where you, how we might move this forward. And we're still working that out. So, but we're very aware that your time is valuable and that we need to be productive, but also responsive to our charge and some of the bigger issues that you've raised. We need to be very clear on what we can and cannot do here. So I hope that next time we're able to pin down our process even more so that you don't continue to feel any anxiety about that. But I know as a facilitator, I felt like the conversation was fairly rich. Almost all of you contributed. And if you didn't, and there was a reason, please let us know, write us and give us some feedback so that we can make it easier for you to contribute. And again, we will come with some recommendations for how to move forward most efficiently and also with a real sense of our North Star and why we're here together. So thank you very much for your time.
Have a good day, everybody.
Have a
Thank you.
wonderful holiday too. Enjoy your cabins, many of you.